My name is Tony DiPaolo. I'm the Vice President of Retail Solutions at SPS Commerce. For those of you unfamiliar with SPS, I thought I'd do a quick introduction and then we can get into the meat of the presentation today. So SPS is a global technology company that has built the world's leading supply chain network. And so what that means is we build solutions that help buying organizations and selling organizations around the world digitize and automate the exchange of data as part of their purchase and fulfillment process. So think purchase orders, advanced ship notifications, invoices, things of that nature. And more broadly speaking, we also help our customers to monitor their supply chain with a suite of tools that help them get a real-time view into what's happening in their supply chain so that they can react to any opportunity that presents itself, and also solutions that help our customers measure the supply chain over time. So not just that real time, but also over time so that they can benchmark and compare themselves over time and implement strategies for continuous improvement to evolve their supply chain and be as efficient as possible. We've been part of the broader NRF retail community for the better part of the last 20 years, and we thought, we're really appreciative of all of the support that we get from our customers, like the folks that are going to be in our panel today and all the folks that are here today. And so we thought it might be fun to kind of give back a little bit today in the form of a sweepstakes. So if you scan the QR code that we have up here today and enter your name, you will be entered into a real-time sweepstakes during the course of this presentation, where at the end of which we will be giving out 3 of these $1,000 Visa gift cards. So we're going to call out some names at the end for the folks. I'll leave it up there. I see everyone's phones going up to scan that. We'll call some names at the end for the folks that win. Thank you all for participating and hanging out on the last day of NRF. I know it's a bit of a rally. So, as we thought about this presentation, retail has always been dealing with a state of change, and that's no different heading into 2026. But the density of pressure, more channels, more volatility, more expectations are all kind of colliding at once in a way that does feel a little bit unique. And when pressure stacks like that, it doesn't just create more work. It also creates different decisions that have to be made, and it shapes those decisions. So some examples: inventory decisions become customer experience decisions. Vendor decisions become availability decisions. Returns decisions become labor decisions. We recognize that this is kind of happening, and we wanted to leverage that supply chain network that we talked about earlier that makes SPS so unique to kind of bring it to life for this panel today. And so what we did, is we went out and we analyzed our supply chain network. And to contextualize the scale of the network, on an annual basis, we have about $1 trillion of transactions flowing through the network, and somewhere north of 120,000 different organizations flowing data through the supply chain network. So there's a lot there to parse through, but it's something that we, consistently do, because we think bringing the network to life it tells us such a wonderful story and educates so many folks on the opportunities that are out there. And when we analyzed over 9,000 different signals in preparation for this, think order flows, fulfillment behaviors, compliance patterns, sell-through velocity, there were some patterns that started to emerge, and it felt like those would be a great topic for today's panel. And so we're calling these the 4 forces, and that's really what's going to be the framework for today's discussion with our panelists. We're going to talk through these 4 forces, and they're going to share tips, tricks, anecdotes about how they've impacted their business and kind of what they've done to counter or leverage these trends that are out there. So we've got to build. First and foremost, AI. I think we've all came here expecting to learn a little bit about AI, and most of us at this point are probably experimenting with AI, I hope. And what we've observed, and I think if you've experimented directly with AI, you know this to be true, is that it's only as good as the data on top of which it is being used. And so AI is amplifying data quality for better or worse. And so we'll talk a little bit about how AI has impacted some of the businesses that are going to join us up here in a minute. Then we'll get into Omni. Omni's been around for a while. We've heard Omni for the last 15 years. And I think at this point, most retail organizations or anyone really selling consumer goods has had an Omni initiative. But when we kind of look at Omni, it almost feels like there's these two counterweights that you have to navigate. There's precision and there's speed. And I think most of us would say precision is more important than speed, but speed matters too. And we'll talk a little bit about that today and how the folks from the different retailers that are going to join us here in a minute have navigated that and kind of decided to prioritize what they've prioritized and the efficacy of that. Next, within our network, we've observed this kind of what we're calling the great rewiring of trade. And what we've noticed is that in this past year or so, buying organizations, large retailers, distributors, and grocers are onboarding new trade partners, new suppliers, faster than ever and with more velocity. And they're doing that not just to drive the appropriate costs, but because of macroeconomic factors that are driving the need to find new suppliers. And so, we'll talk a little bit about what are those signals, how do you observe your own supply chain and the greater market so that you can kind of execute on assortment and vendor strategies that align to what the market needs. And then, last but not least, we'll talk a little bit about this concept of adaptive commerce. And what we mean here is, and what we're going to be talking about here is kind of this evolving volatility with respect to demand and how organizations that set themselves up to be hyper-reactive have an advantage. So, no one wants to have a reactive strategy. Maybe they would say that's no strategy at all, but that is the world so many of us live in. And so how do you structure yourself in a way to make sure that you can react as quickly as possible against a competitive cohort, if you will? And so with that, we have our context. We'll have some slides as we kind of work through these topics, and I would ask our panelists to come on up here, and I'll introduce the three of them, and then we'll jump into the discussion. So first, I'm going to introduce Jeff Sabo. Maybe Jeff, just raise your hand so everyone knows which one you are. Jeff is a VP of Supply Chain at Canadian Tire Corporation. And I thought I would share a little bit of details about Canadian Tire Corporation because as part of this, I learned a lot about them, and I wanted to share some of what I learned with you all. Canadian Tire is not just a retailer. It's a Canadian institution. For over a century, the company has evolved into one of Canada's most expansive and diversified retail ecosystems, spanning automotive, hardware, sports, leisure, everyday essentials. What truly differentiates Canadian Tire is its uniquely Canadian operating model, anchored by independently owned associate stores and supported by one of the most sophisticated retail supply chains in the world. From iconic private brands to a deeply integrated financial services arm, Canadian Tire operates at a scale and complexity few retailers any in the world can match, all while remaining incredibly close to the needs of Canadian households that they serve. So thank you, Jeff, for joining us.
That's setting the bar really high, Tony. Thank
you. Owen, maybe just kind of raise your hand quickly. Owen is the Chief Merchandising Officer of Spreetail, and also a very unique and cool and fascinating organization that I thought I would share a bit about. Spreetail represents a newer generation of retail, digitally native, data-driven, and built specifically for scale in the e-commerce era. Founded in 2006, and as I learned last night by college students on a credit card, Spreetail has grown into a leading online retailer and logistics operator, partnering with thousands of brands to help them win across major markets and direct-to-consumer channels. What sets Spreetail apart is its deep operational focus, proprietary technology, a distributed fulfillment network, and relentless emphasis on speed, accuracy, and customer experience. They sit at the intersection of retail, logistics, and technology, offering a modern blueprint for how commerce businesses can scale profitably in an increasingly complex digital landscape.
Thanks, Tony. Hi, everyone.
And last but certainly not least, Mr. Robert Brace, Vice President of Distribution from RONA. If you're not familiar, RONA is one of Canada's most trusted names in home improvement. With a legacy that stretches back to the 1930s, what makes RONA unique is its hybrid model, combining the scale and sophistication of a national retailer with deep roots in local dealer-owned stores that are closely connected to the communities that they serve. Serving both DIY homeowners and professional contractors, RONA operates across a diverse banner portfolio that reflects the varied needs of Canadian consumers. Their supply chain and merchandising complexity mirrors that diversity, making them a fascinating example of how long-standing retailer continues to modernize while staying true to its local-first DNA. Thank you, Robert, for joining us.
Thank you.
So, kind of first question, as we talked through the forces and we kind of called out these things that are up here in front of us, when you heard those guys, which of the four forces, that's going to be a tongue twister all day, which of the four forces really kind of caught your attention and kind of made you think like, yep, that's something we're working on, or that's top of mind, and maybe what about it, or what are you working on related to it? And maybe Owen, we'll try to just start with you down at the end and kind of work back this way.
I think for us at Spreetail, so Spreetail is, we sell on 20 different e-commerce channels, from Amazon to TikTok, Walmart, Target, Lowe's, and many others. And the problem we often have is how to replicate our listing infrastructure and SKUs across all these channels in a very effective way. And so I think for me, number one there around AI is critical. We tried a lot of what I would call advanced methodologies with AI, and we struggled. But then when we started focusing on more what I call hygiene, simplistic areas, we saw huge amounts of success. And I'll give you a quick example. We have about 20,000 SKUs, and each of those SKUs have, say, a dozen product images that go with them. And since we're syndicating across 20 different channels in the US, Canada, UK, Europe, it can be very difficult for us to be sure that even that same hero image is showing up properly on all those different infrastructure points every day, because there's a lot of technology points. And so we send the AI every day to go just examine and check and come back and tell us, does this hero image match? And that simple AI usage was able to drive tremendous content adherence and fidelity improvement. And so that's one way where it was a very simple thing that now, instead of having maybe a global team member or an automation of some kind, I can quickly get AI stood up, very affordable, and was able to save us a lot of dollars.
Cool, thank you. And I think it's not surprising to hear an organization that is digitally native have kind of the culture and the DNA to take an emerging technology like AI and apply it to your business. So I'm curious, maybe Jeff, an organization that's not necessarily a digital native, right? That's been around since the beginning of commerce in Canada, as far as I can tell. How do you guys kind of culturally adopt a new technology like that?
Yeah, good morning. I think for Canadian Tire, being a legacy retailer in Canada, we're a 100-plus-year-old company. We did not start in the digital age. We have a lot of historical best practices when it comes to hard good, soft good retail. For us, being a 100-year-old retailer, we wanted to still be competitive 100 years from now. So how do you continue to adapt and change? And for us, organizationally, we've really taken a guided approach to how we compete in retail in Canada. So very purposeful statements in terms of who we are, how we compete, and it's guided by making life in Canada better. So very simple statement. As a retailer, you can stretch that a little bit to say, we provide products and services that make Canadians' life easier, no matter what they're doing, whether it's automotive service in our service bays, that first bike for your child, your first pair of skates, the lawnmower you need, just being there for the customer when they need us at the right product, the right price. And for us, we've just embarked on a new transformation strategy for the next 3 to 5 years, True North. So we're really focusing in on our Canadian enterprise. We've sold some of our additional, I'll say, global assets like Helly Hansen this past year. So really honing in on the Canadian ecosystem. And with that, we're driving kind of 4 fundamental pillars with the customer at the core. We're looking at further investments in both our digital and in-store experience. So we know that shoppers will approach us through the digital first, or come in store and purchase online and through the digital channel. So we're making significant investments in both bricks and mortar and digital enterprise, as well as looking at our loyalty program. Within Canada, somebody was asking me last night, when was our loyalty program introduced? I think it probably goes back close to 100 years ago. We were printing our loyalty money on paper So the Canadian Mint, the same company that prints our Canadian currency, we had them print the Canadian Tire money, and it's kind of iconic in Canada. So lots of brand loyalty, brand awareness there. And we're further expanding our reach in terms of loyalty. We don't have a high transaction base. A lot of our purchases come, maybe once a week, once a month, high ticket. We have some consumables, but a lot of discretionary. So we're partnering with different Canadian companies to try to drive more loyalty engagement through partnerships with companies like RBC, WestJet, Tim Hortons, Petro-Canada, so petroleum-based. So again, trying to drive loyalty engagement into our ecosystem, because we have data that shows as soon as we have an active loyal member, they shop across our banner of companies much higher with a greater frequency, greater spend than a non-loyalty member. So driving our partnerships is a key principle there. And consumer-centric retail. So what does that mean? For us, we don't want to just sell a product to a customer. Well, we want to do that, but we want it to be intentional in terms of the occasion. What are they buying it for? Do they have children going off to school? Do they need to buy detergent, sheets, shelves? So being very intentional in terms of how we talk to the customer, and that we're there for their different occasions through life. And as part of our strategy as well, just being agile and scaled in terms of our organizational design. So eliminating some of those barriers we had across our banners and just driving scale within our enterprise. So for us, like, adaptive speed is critical for us to compete for the next 100 years.
Thank you, Jeff. And, for anyone in the room who's sat in, business meetings, simplicity is not easy. So to have such a simple vision is actually very difficult. So I appreciate that you guys were able to kind of nail that down, because a lot of companies, I do think, struggle with how to communicate vision. And it seems like you guys have nailed that over the course of your 100 plus years. Robert, shifting over to you and RONA, when you kind of look at these four forces, what kind of jumps off the page that is aligned to what y'all are working on there? And I'm going to I was notified I should put the QR code back up for some late arrivals. So I'm just going to trace backwards here while Robert pulls his answer.
Yeah, it's for RONA, the omnichannel is certainly the driving force for our change. We're traditionally a store-only sort of model that really, old school thinking, but we're shifting away from that. We've had an e-commerce presence for a while, but it's never been as sophisticated. Sourcing's never been that great. So, addressing that and bringing some of that back into distribution. But as mentioned in the intro, one of the key pillars for us, one of the big growth areas is on our pro business. We are growing exponentially in that area. And I think of, the macroeconomic environment in Canada where we have, unemployment rate a little bit higher, consumer confidence wavering a little bit. There's the threat of higher prices with tariffs and so on. But then on the flip side of that, lower interest rates through the Bank of Canada, and and there's also other programs coming in place, Build Canada Homes, to address the housing crisis. So we're seeing a change in pattern on our DIY side, but as we introduce and do more with our pros, that business is growing significantly. So that has been, the top of the pyramid for us in terms of our priorities, focusing in on that piece. So it introduces another channel that we are focused on. So for us, the need to be flexible, create that flexibility to adapt to various channels that we're introducing. These are not new channels. Like when we think about online and store fulfillment and so on, it's for an 85-year-old company, unfortunately, it's new for us. So we're adapting this and bringing more of this in-house. So omnichannel would definitely be the force for RONA that we're really focused on.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, then there's definitely a theme, right? Listening to the three, there's a theme about adaptability. There's a theme about being flexible and being able to kind of move at the pace of the market and try and keep up with the consumer that is, and the supply chain and the global macroeconomic factors that just seem to be moving faster than ever. And I think that's what we identified when we reviewed the data. So I'm glad we're on the mark there. Let's dive a little bit deeper into our first force here. I guess I should have done that one earlier. AI. And when we kind of looked at the data and just kind of saw what was out there, there's clearly this disconnect between people, operational leaders wanting to leverage AI or already leveraging AI to mitigate disruptions in their business or to be more efficient, but then conversely, not really trusting the data and the AI itself. And so there's just kind of disconnect between system integration and quality with what folks ultimately see as the opportunity. And so I would start, Jeff, with you here, where I would kind of ask the question of, in your business, where has AI helped the most? And where has it kind of maybe exposed some limitations where you're almost looking at what it is you're doing today and realize we need enhanced process or enhanced data or whatever?
Yeah, imagine if I sat up here and said we have AI 100% figured out, fully integrated, no issues. That'd be
This
great.
is a safe space.
So I say that in jest because within retail, I've been in retail for 25 years and in supply chain for a lot of that time. And I like to think that we're analytically minded, process discipline, looking for optimization opportunities. I've been part of teams that have, data scientists, OR specialists, PhDs. 15 years ago, I had somebody sitting in my office describing machine learning and neural networks, right? Like that was fantastic back then. So we've always been on this iterative approach in terms of our analytics, and we are just trying to figure it out. We're releasing some tools within the organization, getting the team to have this AI first mindset. So when they're thinking about a problem, thinking about a solution, it can be a very simple administrative solution that they're trying to solve, just thinking about it first. How can I use AI? And what is AI? Like it could just be Copilot. It could just be help me prepare for a one-on-one. Help me put together a presentation. So very simple kind of, I'll say more administrative tactics. I can't wait until we're at the point in the organization where we have broader adoption across our teams where they can just leverage these tools as part of a toolkit that they already use today in terms of their analytics and horsepower. I think it's just going to be, again, transformational in terms of what it can do on predictive analytics, how it can look at optimization. But I think where AI can help that maybe some other tools and analytics fall short of is eliminating complete work streams. So I think that is very close to happening in a lot of our supply chain areas on the kind of the back office approach. It can just eliminate a lot of handoffs, touch points of data where you just don't need all of those spreadsheets. You don't need all of the interaction where you get the right people looking at the problem the right way and have the right tool, and they can eliminate work streams, make it simpler, and save hours of time on some of those, I'll say, non-value add tasks that just need to get done.
It totally makes sense, right? So streamlining and automation seem to be a huge opportunity for AI. And so, Robert, I would turn to you and kind of ask, what are those inputs that need to be rock solid before unleashing automation so that it doesn't create chaos in the organization, if that makes sense?
Well, I don't know if we're going to get to rock solid inputs. I think for RONA's perspective, anyway, we're traditionally that store only model, and we were able to create this level of safety stock that you could sort of smooth some of the demand and have be able to be a little more predictable in that model. And now we introduce DIY direct ship. We introduce that pro fulfillment. It's really adding a level of variability into all of the forecasts. So we're actually going further away from that rock solid input. I think the question for me is more like, where can we add that level of automation that's going to help minimize some of the chaos that's out there? Jeff just mentioned, like the non-value added tasks. That's key for us. We are looking at just simplifying our operations, simplifying the tasks that we're asking people to do, and automating a lot of those things. So they remove the data entry, let them do something that's more value added. We've actually been learning from students. We have an internship program that's been going for a couple of years now, and these students are coming in, they're teaching us about how we can do things easier and faster. Like this past cohort that we had, there was one student that was able to leverage AI for linking our promotional calendar through our demand management system, and then ultimately giving us the ability to reslot our warehouses in advance of the demand hitting those warehouses. That frees up our time to be able to manage the variation that comes in the plan. So I don't know if we're going to have those direct input that's going to be rock solid, but I think AI used in the right way is going to enable us to just operate within that chaos.
I hope that intern got an offer.
Indeed, he did.
To make sure. Otherwise, we would have taken his business card at SPS. So then, Owen, over to you. And I think that merchandising lens is really interesting here on top of the supply chain. I'm just kind of curious, what signals do you rely on, and where do you think that you don't, I guess at this point, see human judgment going away? Because I don't want the robots to replace us all. So where do you kind of see signals and human judgment kind of staying even in the world of the proliferation of AI and automation?
I'm sure everyone has their own experience with AI, but for us, we probably thought initially we could use AI to do things like when we load all our data through a OpenAI ChatGPT module. So the system has all of our internal data, all of our sales and information, and we thought that it could then analyze every week and do kind of simplistic WBR type reviews of different brands, different businesses, different channels. And that was disastrous. We actually had the product once, the AI completely hallucinate, and it mixed up an employee with a brand, and then it gave us all this detail about how this employee brand had performed the prior week, and there was no brand. It was an employee. It was so comical. But it sounded so official. You could have presented it to your board, and they'd be like, sounds good. It was Parker Van Roy, actually, was the employee. So we kind of backed away from that and then moved more into just simplistic things. And so I'll give you an example. The tariff changes this year were a huge impact to our business. We're a top 100 importer in the U.S. and tens and tens and tens of millions of extra tariffs to pay. And so where we were able to use AI was actually a thing we were concerned about is we knew that normal elasticity wouldn't apply when everyone was facing tariffs, but we needed to understand all of the digital shelf competition for each of our SKUs and how those were being impacted by the tariffs to then assess, are we going to be in the same tariff situation as all the other like SKUs, or is our SKU going to be tariffed and others are not, or will others be tariffed and we won't? Because in any of those scenarios, we would need to know that input because our elasticity would dramatically change on that item. And we were able to use AI to quickly scan the market and understand the country origin of the digital shelf competitors of the SKUs that we work with. And of course, that data was only about 80% right. And we found that out by having another AI tool go and do the same thing. So just like very simplistic auditing and having AI audit AI and do it again and again and again gets you finally to a level of hygiene. But I think when it comes to human judgment, being able to still scan large amounts of data and have lots of merchant buyer type intuition, I don't see that changing, at least in the near term. Maybe 6 months from now, I'll say something different. But.
Well, I mean, and it's funny. I mean, even I think back to being at the show a year ago, and the AI stories were much less tangible from the different brands and retailers as to how they were applying. So by all means, or by all accounts, we're not there yet, I don't think. We all see a lot of opportunity, but just to hear you all talk through some of the experimentation and initiatives that you've undergone, it's clearly maturing quite quickly compared to even where we were a year ago. So encouraging stuff on AI across the board. Thank you guys. Shifting gears a little bit, we'll move into this kind of topic of omnichannel precision at scale. I think we all kind of know that there's inherent value in the omnichannel consumer, almost similar to kind of Jeff's story earlier about loyal consumers kind of outpacing traditional customers or customers that are in loyalty programs outpacing. I think the omnichannel consumer is very similar in that regard. Those cross-channel shoppers are valuable, but they're also fickle because if you're not effective, you're not efficient, you're not accurate, you'll lose them. And there are a couple big retailers or marketplaces out there that are very good at these things. And so as we shift into omnichannel, I'm kind of curious, Jeff, from your perspective, where does precision break down? Where do you typically see precision break down in Omni, and what have you guys done to kind of address that?
Yeah, for us, in terms of scale, so we operate, call it north of 1,100 retail store locations across our banners with both regional and national fulfillment from distribution centers. For our omnichannel, we have a hybrid approach. So we have store and hub fulfillment. We have DC fulfillment. So we actually had a pretty successful, I'll say, 2025 versus prior years in terms of really fine-tuning that hybrid e-com omnichannel fulfillment, where there was still variability, but we start with the forecast, and I'll say that's where the first point of failure can happen, and then it can just drive a lot of costs into the process later on. So as intentional as we can be with the forecast in terms of inventory deployment and its intention. So is that product quick to market into certain regions? Is it weather dependent? What type of demand are you expecting? Do you want national reach? Do you need buffer stock in your DC? Prior years, I will say we just didn't have the toolkit. We were still learning in terms of how that deployment should happen. And it obviously drove a lot of split shipments. It drives a lot of freight costs into the network. So the more intentional we can be with that, the better in terms of inventory placement. So starts with the forecast, ends with the forecast. And we had much greater success. More than anything, just the attention put on it in 2025 across our channels and banners and driving greater customer satisfaction. In the end, you can get that product to them, and you also don't need to get into different type of markdown situations, erode your margin if you have inventory in the wrong store and taking up space for the next season.
If you were mixing the perfect forecast cocktail, would you say 2 parts science, 1 part art, or how would you balance that out? I don't have the answer to that. I'll say historical models, there's just too much volatility to be able to rely on them. So I think you need just more inputs to be able to get a good forecast, and you just need to have greater elasticity in what you're trying to do. So less prescriptive on a specific number, perhaps a little bit of a bigger range. Okay, makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And so, Robert, when we kind of look at having to maintain precision at volume as these different fulfillment paths increase, have you had to make any operational trade-offs, or what are the things that have kind of impacted the business that you guys have kind of looked at and had to make those decision points on?
Yeah, it's I've said it in one of the prior comments, but RONA is we'll say old school type of company, and not really sophisticated with the way product flows. So with that, and I'll say the building materials industry at large is not really innovative in terms of how we flow and manage that inventory. But there's a silver lining here. We can clearly see the path ahead. Many other companies have already forged this path, and we're quickly catching up. I think of just inventory flows like vendor prepared cross dock and flow through, DIY direct ship, et cetera. Those are all things that have either recently launched or launching in the next number of months. So there's a pace at which we're operating that. For us, the trade-off is more like we need to get to a respectable line very quickly. So we may be accepting a little less on the precision side from a project, from a launch of these than we normally would. There's a term that our IT group often uses called MVP, or minimum viable product. I really don't like the term, but it's something that we choose to accept in an effort to advance our business and get some of these things up and running faster. So that's really the trade-off for us. So then what ends up happening is you're left with maybe getting 90% of the way there in your solution, and then that remaining 10% requires some form of manual intervention to ensure we hit the customer service expectations. Those are the pieces that we're looking at any form of automation to help us with, to minimize that labor impact. But those are the trade-offs that we're seeing on our journey, and it's really heavily driven by the pace in which we're deploying these various inventory flows or system upgrades.
Well, it sounds like you guys do a really good job of kind of knowing who you are and who your customer is, which again is one of those things that seems simple, but can be very easy for organizations to kind of stray from. And you guys don't lose sight of that in your organization, which I think is probably why you guys are who you are. Owen, when we kind of think about it through that merchandising lens, where does execution accuracy most directly impact assortment performance with respect to kind of this omni lens? And I know you guys are digital native, but just curious.
Yeah, I mean, for us, shipping speed is everything. We aim for 40 hours click to delivery from when the customer clicks to buy the product to when it hits their doorstep. And so to do that well, in stock, lead time, ordering, all channel integrations have to be excellent. And so I think we track all those input metrics and organize against that. And what we see, which I think even our traditional retail friends, everyone is all pushing for faster and faster shipping. And I think it's not necessarily because customers expect to get a grill the same day or need it, but at the end of the day, all the digital integrations and platforms and even the LLMs are going to focus and are prioritizing speed. And so at the end of the day, regardless of whether the consumer wants the item faster, the LLM or the digital environment, whether that's Walmart or another channel, Home Depot, is going to give you prominence in that. And so those are the focus areas for us as we scale.
Cool. Thank you. And so kind of moving over to this great rewiring of trade topic, thinking through the process of expanding assortments, adding new inventory to counter kind of whatever's going on in the world, be that consumer driven or macro driven. Owen, I actually wanted to kind of start with you here. How do you navigate that balancing act between assortment breadth and protecting margin, and what are kind of the risk signals that might influence your decision making when you're kind of navigating that?
Yeah, I'm sure as many of us we're like many retailers, a single digit EBITDA company. And so when there's a 30-40% tariff, many items were taking negative profit that day. That was it. So I think in some ways, looking at profitability versus assortment was very simplistic because the costs were so extreme. I mean, never in probably any of our careers have we seen that type of cost change. For us, what we realized, and I'll give you a quick example, we sell a lot of items in baby gear, strollers, car seats, etc. And if you look at the top 500 baby items sold in the U.S. and you compare them year over year, they're up in price by about, and this is online, about 22%. But if you actually look at the top sellers now, they're actually only up in the single digits. And that's because what everybody has done, including Graco, others, is essentially everyone's just shifting SKUs very quickly. So when there's a lot of tariffs and cost change, everyone is moving to new products and quickly whether that's despecking, changing features, adding features. And so what we focus on and we've seen is that the brands right now that are growing in market share and winning are the ones that have the greatest percentage of their assortment that is generating their sales this year that's fresh within a 12-month new assortment. So what we do is we measure how much of your assortment did you launch this year and how much revenue is that driving of your total. And we look for a benchmark of 10 to 20%. And so the brands and the manufacturers that we think are in a lot of trouble, if you look at them and you're like, wow, only 1% of their sales this year have come from items they've newly launched in the last year, that brand, in our view, is in a lot of pain. But the ones, and you think of like a Shark Ninja, who we work with, I mean, they might see 20, 30% of their sales come from items they launched this year. And I think that's where, as retailers, whether it's through private label or with manufacturers, we have to push our brands to launch new items. And that's where, obviously, shameless plug for SPS. They've been a great partner of ours for a long time, but they can be fantastic at just quickly scaling that execution of those new items.
Thank you for the plug. And so, Jeff, I'm curious with that planning, that supply chain planning perspective, when you think about kind of the evolving nature of your supplier community, what assumptions had to change to manage that variability without just over buffering inventory and creating a glut?
Yeah, I'll say, everything that Owen described, fits as well. When you have variability in lead time, product scarcity, we've been through, very easy just to hit the buy button and buffer yourself that way. I think we felt that in prior years, and we saw our OpEx costs just balloon because you're in that whiplash effect. You're catching the curve up to buy, and then you miss the mark and you overshoot, and you end up with a lot of inventory that you've got to manage through. So we felt that in different product categories, and I think again with intention through that learning is what do we want to show up for and stand for in our product assortments, and the time of year, the need, what products are high risk to demand price fluctuation, consumer trend, macroeconomic trends. If, for example, you're looking at your spring summer assortment and you've got patio barbecue, what's your price point look like? Are people going to lean down into a lower price point, or are they going to buy more cushion replacement? So how do you want to spend your money, invest your inventory based on the outlooks that you have, and through the enterprise hold hands on what that approach is, so that you're going to maybe find a ceiling on some things and have to chase versus overbuy against others, and just again having strong collaboration with the supplier community to understand what our approach is and how they can support us if we find ourselves understocked in season and need some quicker replenishment.
Makes a ton of sense. And then it kind of begs the question, Robert, what changes do you make to facilities or flow paths or partner expectations to absorb that complexity?
Yeah, it's we're looking at the various channels that we're operating in and trying to make those best choices of leveraging, whether it be real estate or labor, MHE, and so on. We do a lot of work in terms of evaluating order profiles and what that flow needs to look like. And in some cases, it's a natural adjacency to what is already in place. I think of our franchise or our dealer stores. So these operate in really small towns. Their buying pattern is very much like an online shopper, buying in units rather than cases, that type of thing. So to introduce online fulfillment alongside store fulfillment, we didn't really have to do much inside the warehouse. There's some minor tweaks to packing stations and things of that nature.
Sure.
But that was minor. There's other pieces as we move from a distribution model to fulfillment model, and we start bringing in vendor prepare cross-stock and flow through and other various inventory channels. that does require a little more on the redesign, and we've evaluated, taken racking down in places, inserted new racking elsewhere, new types of MHE to manage that product. So you have that, and then finally there's the pro business, which looks very different than almost anything else that we're managing. And in that case, in some situations, we've just decided to share a roof and share the people and equipment, but operating as a warehouse within a warehouse. And that may not be the long-term decision, but we're making decisions right now as we try to build out what these models are going to look like and how predictive it's going to be as we think about inventory and the buying patterns of each of these customer types. From a vendor partner point of view, we're expecting more from our vendors. We are expecting them to be key participants in what we're building, and that may mean they're able to react to us a little faster than what historically they had as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, as kind of being that demand side partner, right? The one that's dealing with the consumer where there is so much shift. It makes sense that kind of having to have your supplier partners kind of match your ability to be dynamic is a critical lever for the business. It makes a ton of sense. So kind of moving into our last topic here, right? The adaptive commerce era, where we were talking earlier a little bit about the best organizations are those that can be reactive to these significant spikes in demand and general demand volatility. And so, Jeff, we'd kind of start with you here. I'm kind of curious, like, what are those early signals that help you adjust before demand swings turn into excess or shortages? What are the things that you're kind of keeping an eye on to try and avoid those scenarios where you can?
Yeah, for me and for us, I think the more signals we can look at, the better. So yes, we'll take any signal we can, but also interpreting it correctly. So obviously, point of sale trend is super important. But with e-com, omnichannel, looking at how consumers are interacting with our digital assets. So, click through rate to purchase. Are we seeing different search triggers and spikes in certain categories? So, when you're starting to approach the spring summer business, are you seeing people in January, February start to do some early research on high ticket discretionary spend like patio, barbecue, cookers, those types of things? So then it sets us up to be able to respond. The purchasing of those goods oftentimes is months in advance, but we can at least respond and see if we are in a position of strength or if we'll need to, again, collaborate with our supplier partners to respond to those. So yeah, the more signals we can get, the better. Also looking at, again, macro trends in terms of interest rates, consumer spending behavior, those types of larger trends as well, and putting the investment where you want to win and taking some risk on maybe categories that are shorter lead time, high performing vendors where you have very consistent fill rates. You maybe not need to invest as much in your own inventory because you can have a good partnership there where they're going to backstop you with inventory. And lower performing fill rates or sporadic supply, you have to maybe lean a little bit heavier into. But yeah, lots of signals, and I think that's where we're looking at exploring with AI is how can you take those signals and make some educated decisions from them.
Sure, yeah, and I mean, so you kind of you have more signals and inputs than ever before, and that requires agility or adaptability to then be able to execute, which kind of leads me back to you, Robert, where my kind of question is, how do you think about, or where does adaptability or agility still kind of have the most challenges within kind of trying to support these volatility spikes? Is it labor? Is it your systems? Is it the readiness of your partners? What are those things that are still kind of tricky?
It's really all of the above, but I'll zoom in a little on labor. I think that's our biggest challenge. If the macro trends would say, the unemployment rate is 100 basis points worse than it was last year. So you'd think labor shouldn't be as big of a challenge year over year, but in the light industrial market, Yeah, it's a significant challenge. It's a very competitive market, and for us to react as fast as we need to react, it's difficult to get labor that quickly. So you end up, competing with many companies for the same resource pool. So that's certainly our, we'll say, immediate largest challenge there. Systems are always going to be something that need to be updated. So we're trying to leverage whatever automation we can to simplify the jobs that people are performing and try to have a little more flexibility in what we do with the existing labor pool that we have. Simplifying processes is always important and something that we continue to evaluate as we add new service offerings, new inventory flows. So that's where we're seeing the biggest challenge in being as reactive and adaptive to this changing landscape.
Yeah, agility's hard at scale, right? There's a lot of dependencies there and a lot of moving parts that you kind of got to keep harmonized, and that makes a lot of sense. And I'd be curious, Owen, as we kind of wrap up on this topic, when we think about kind of what limits your ability to pivot assortment or inventory, what are those signals that you're using to kind of move as quickly as you can?
Yeah, I think our biggest limiter is not the upstream data, search query performance data, or other consumer interest data, and not feeding that back to the brands. We do that. It's actually a lot of brands are in the middle of moving factories, changing factories, right? Trying to optimize their cost, their tariffs, et cetera. And we've seen, as a lot of brands have moved out of China, which many are, we are seeing, tremendous delays, impacts, factories don't go live, quality's not good, recalls, et cetera. And so I think that's where we're really cautious now around studying the data and try and understand, because of course, it's one thing to have a slightly overpriced product due to tariffs, but it's another thing not to have any product at all because it's now out of stock because the Vietnam factory wasn't ready on time. And we've seen that happen a lot. And then, of course, that can create substitution problems because other items you have will now sell a lot. But then when you get the original hero item back live, those items will fall off. So back to your other demand signal problem, that can get really challenging. So those are some of the things we think about, is just what I would say is, as a retailer, do I have a really sharp knowledge of my brand and manufacturer, factory partners' capabilities, resources, et cetera? And the more I know, the better. The less I know there, the more exposed I am.
Thank you. Knowing your partners, right, and kind of understanding their capabilities seems to be a recurring theme as well as we go through today. So we've kind of talked through our 4 topics, and I appreciate all the context. Hopefully it was helpful for everyone in the audience. I certainly learned quite a bit myself. What I'd like to finish up with is a bit of a lightning round of questions. So we got 3 questions that we'll kind of work through, high-level questions, and we'll have each of you guys kind of answer them. And we'll kind of wrap up with our sweepstakes winners, which I've just received the text message of the names. So we'll be announcing those here momentarily. So the first question, and maybe we start here with you, Robert, and we can kind of just go down the line. What assumption did pressure, or let's just say change or shifting in the landscape, force you to abandon this year? Maybe something you always thought to be true that you're kind of maybe questioning a little bit now.
Working in operations and distribution, we love our rules. We try to standardize as much as we can. Trying to create that flow that's predictive inside of our buildings and our operations. As we look at our fastest growing business, that pro job site delivery, they don't operate on the same rules that we operate in. If they need rooftop delivery of shingles and they need that tomorrow for a job, to say, you missed your cutoff window by a couple of hours, not really something that's acceptable. Their buying patterns are heavily driven by the weather. They're not going up when it's raining or when it's really cold. So the demand is very unpredictable. For us, we've had to sort of abandon some of the preconceived sort of distribution rules and service level expectations that we've kept in-house, and be more open to just working with this new customer base and growing our business with them. So it's a change for how we're operating. It doesn't mean that we're not going to try to standardize. We always will. We'll try to do those things where possible, try to automate where possible. But in the end, this year, it's really focused on growing the business, and that may mean not following the same sort of steps that we normally would.
Breaking the rules. Love it. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, for us, maybe I'll tuck into physical assets. I think abandoned the thought that you could scale e-com, omnichannel fulfillment from a traditional bricks and mortar DC without scale, without process change. So I say we abandoned that thought, and we proved through some of our distribution centers that do support hybrid store and DC omnichannel, that when you invest in the physical assets, the automation, like goods to person systems, that you can really leverage your scale and drive your cost per unit down. And we had a very successful from a fulfillment and a cost per unit this past cyber period, that like it just proved itself that when you invest in that technology, it can pay itself back with service level and cost.
Owen, maybe one assumption you kind of abandoned this year?
Yeah, I think we've always been very static with seasonality or item sell through, and I think both with where consumers are now around, I think, promotional sensitivity, price sensitivity, as well as weather changes and other changes, we've had to take a much more proactive approach to how we approach item review and item seasonality as this kind of ongoing monthly cadence instead of a once every couple of years review.
Yep. It again makes a lot of sense. Okay, so last question. We'll kind of go down the line. I think this is going to be a quick one. I have some ideas as to what I think the answers are going to be, but I'm curious, what's the one performance metric that matters most in 2026? And Owen, maybe we start with you and just work back this way.
Well, the one score I would say I'm really focused on is probably the net promoter score of our brands and how they love us. That's the key thing. But to be more specific in the business, I would say probably something that's more e-com oriented, which I think you would guess is just our click to delivery speed. We're going to maniacally drive that as low as possible every day until we get it down to 24 or less hours is probably our critical metric. And all of what we've talked about today, Omni, adaptation, AI related, all drives into that.
Love Net Promoter Score, and that was not one that was top of mind for me. It's a great one, so thank you. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, start with the customer. We want to drive customer engagement, customer loyalty, top line revenue. But in terms of like KPI within my world and that affects my world is, I love a good forecast. Forecast accuracy drives a lot of downstream behaviors and opportunities or costs. So a good forecast, an accurate forecast for our KPI.
Think about the customer, make sure they're happy, get it right on knowing what's coming. Robert, you want to bring us home?
Sure. We talked about the growing pro business. So a key performance metric for us is going to be that on-time delivery. That is one of the leading metrics. If we can hit on-time delivery with all of the variability that's in the forecast, I think we're going to be very successful with growing that pro business.
I really appreciate you guys taking the time. We'll do a round of applause from the audience here for our panelists sharing everything with us.